Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Tropical MBA podcast, the podcast for location-independent entrepreneurs. We used that location independence this past week to fly to the great city of New York to hang out with 25, 7, and 8-figure founders. And we come here today to share with you the lessons we learned from them so we can all grow better location-independent businesses. Now, one thing I want to mention here at the top, Ian, is I originally sent you an incredible itinerary that was very affordable.
I remember.
And you balked at it. You didn't take my itinerary. And I think it might be worth sharing how you select an airline in 2025.
Well, just to be clear, don't hate me for saying this, but you haven't always been in our relationship the guy that's, as cost conscious as I am. But I feel like the tables are turning.
I'm willing to put us into the front of the airplane on occasion. I'll just put it that way.
You are. And you sent a great itinerary. The problem was it was Spirit Airlines. And
I didn't know this.
Yeah, I've flown Spirit before, but to be fair, they're cheap. And United was twice as expensive, basically, what we flew on. But not too long ago, I had some pilots come to my house. Nice guys.
In their civilian uniforms.
Nice guys. I would love to eat lunch with them, but I wouldn't necessarily, consider them pilots. I've met a fair amount of pilots. And
you just feel comfortable getting in the back of the airplane behind these guys.
Fast forward, there were Spirit Airlines pilots. And I just said, that's kind of it for me. Like, I understand that there's a low cost associated with this, but I'm going United.
There's a marketing lesson in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, I just had to bring it up because for you to pay a 100% premium on a product, it's worth noting. All right, let's get into it. We were recently in New York. There was 25 founders, all of whom have showed us their P&Ls to prove that they indeed hit the minimum threshold of $1 million in revenue, some much, much more. We had special guests. It was a 3-day event in New York City. We had special guests, aside from our attendees, including Scott Heiferman, famously of meetup.com, one of my favorite all-time websites. We also welcomed Keith Murray of We Are Scientists, an all-time rockin' band and a killer rock star, and such a down-to-earth guy given his fame. We visited Citi Field, home of the Mets. We dined at multiple nice restaurants, and importantly, we had endless business conversations where we, in a structured way and unstructured occasionally, dug into our biggest business challenges. So the question posed today is, what can we learn from 7 and 8-figure founders? We cannot possibly scratch the surface, but we have come here today to the microphones to try.
Just want to say this real quick, Dan. We were at Citi Field. They graciously put our logo and said, "Welcome Dynamite Circle," on the Citi Field, which is the biggest jumbotron in all the stadiums and all the baseball stadiums in the country.
Yes.
Put our logo up there. It was so cool. We walked into the press room and there it was. And within 45 seconds of leaving the stadium, I had posted that image to my Twitter profile.
Wow.
Yeah. It meant that much to me.
And then we went down to the field and took a photo in front of it and promptly ruined the whole thing with our dumb grins. It was cool, man. Hanging out at just doing some stuff, meeting some rock stars, seeing some baseball. It just sort of sets the table for the business conversations we're having. Get some inspiration going.
Yeah, just also, as a side, like coming to New York, like we've talked about it plenty of times on this podcast when we have this event, but Scott stopping by, Keith stopping by, and then all of our crew coming together in New York City. Like, there's so many impressive people in New York City. It's just hard to imagine a city, where the density is such that you can meet all these people in a couple of days. And the energy is just electric. So I love going there, especially around the holidays. But I just love going there and meeting all these really successful people that are so generous too. I was reminded again in New York just how friendly people are. It's like the opposite of what you read on the internet, but people in New York are just so darn friendly. And thanks again to Scott and Keith for coming out and just being special guests at the event.
Yeah, our members who are rock stars in their own right asked us, hey, how did you guys get these folks to come? Like, what's the bill? And the answer is they wanted to meet the attendees.
Yeah.
They're utterly fascinating. In fact, we sent a list of the names and like what kind of cool businesses they were running. Because Scott, he was like, I'm just curious. Like, I think it's really interesting what's happening in this room. Same thing with Keith, like loves to travel the world, loves to be creative, and basically runs a lifestyle business as a rock band, and super curious. Also wanted to, bring his friends along, bring his bass player along to see what's happening in this room. So we will reveal some of it here today. Okay, we got a bunch of points written down here, but after that intro, I'm tempted to elevate one to the top here, which what we talk about on the show, location independent entrepreneurship, is kind of like this gobbledygook term. Like, we don't even know what to say, but it when you're in the room, when Scott and Keith are commenting on it. You got talented outsiders basically being like, wow, this is not what I see around New York City every day. And so I want to prompt you to talk about this topic of, like, I think what we've always talked about since episode 1, what we talked about a lot this week, is a lot of times the path of success that we see around us comes with the requirement to forego locational freedoms and to forego time freedoms, to essentially sign up for, I will be right here always, and I will be here in the case of larger companies and larger compensation. I will be here for 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, every day in this office, or I will be going on a global tour for 18 months, and I will be in these cities for exactly this much time, and I will appreciate the ambiance of the city, but I won't necessarily explore it because in a day's time I have yet another requirement on my time and location. Meanwhile, you have 25 people in the room getting up to the front of the room, basically sharing how they're doing the exact opposite, but they're not necessarily forgoing the wealth side, which I think is utterly fascinating. Still do.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a member. We were coming back from the Met Stadium, and he's also in EO, which is, I think pretty common for folks to be in like multiple organizations like DC Black and EO kind of at the same time, at least until they figure out, which one's best.
So for reference, EO is one of the most famous entrepreneurial organizations of all time.
Yep.
Founded by Vern Harnish and a handful of other founders. And I think they have 18,000 members. So it's an enormous organization.
Yeah. And I just asked him a basic question in his forum, which is like his group, his mastermind. I think there's, 7 or 8 people. I said, is anybody in your group, in your forum, can anybody do what you do? Which is kind of essentially travel when you want to travel.
Spend the summer in Europe.
Spend the summer in Europe, yeah. And he went down the list in front of me, and not a single person in his forum could spend the summer in Europe. And I just thought, that's mind-blowing. And a lot of these folks have, very large, successful businesses. A lot of these people are successful, obviously. But they can't do exactly what you said, Dan, which is they cannot step away. And it's not even step away or leave your life or your business.
Is it a willingness?
No, I think that they've
It's a design problem.
Yeah, it's a design problem. Exactly. They've designed themselves into a lifestyle and into a business where they just simply cannot do that. And I think that that's fine for a lot of people, unless at a certain point in your life you wake up and you think, I want to do this, and now I'm screwed because I can't. Basically. And I think that is the case with a lot of people, that they want to do what we're doing, but they can't do it now. And so it was just, a design problem. But now you got to kind of go back and re-engineer your life, your relationships, your business, all that stuff. So, what we talk about here is how to have a little bit of design intent. I used to use that word all the time when we were physically manufacturing products. And it's essentially you start with the constraints up front. So it's this needs to be manufactured in this way or assembled in this way, right? So it's design intent, design your business, your life, how you want it to be, and then go out and build the thing that enables you to do that.
Yeah, we were talking recently with listeners. They loved the episode called The Brenwall Code. If you're looking for more TMBA this week over the holiday season, go back into the archives and download that. It is an episode about lifestyle design intent that does not curtail significant financial outcomes. All right, so our first takeaway, Ian, we're seeing increasing numbers of narratives of members acquiring businesses with no cash or no loans. So essentially, there are a lot of legacy businesses that, to a degree, you could call them lifestyle businesses that have existed in our marketplaces for a while. And they are generally frustrated by the traditional acquisition process, especially as perpetrated by PE firms. And so entrepreneurs are offering other entrepreneurs a path away from this unsavory path, sometimes of exiting to PE, especially when the multiples aren't huge, and instead offering a chance for other small businesses to acquire them with really interesting terms.
I'd call these like most strategic deals, right? Like they're basically calling our members who have similar businesses and saying like, hey, I'm looking to exit my business. And you have a similar business, so let's talk. A couple things about this. Number one is in the examples that I heard, and there was a couple in the room that are going through acquisitions like this. In the examples I heard, still there's not really like good marketplaces for these types of businesses. Meaning, if you put them up on the marketplace, and of course you can sell it wherever you want, Empire Flippers, Buy, Bid, Sell, whatever it is, right? But if you put them up there, a lot of times these companies don't have their finances together necessarily 100%, or there's like some reason why they might get slaughtered like in the marketplace or not do well. And most of that, I think from a seller's perspective, has to do with like keeping intact some sense of dignity. So it's like when you put yourself out there, and these are businesses that have been around that are founder-led for 15, 20 years. You put yourself out there and you get these guys, these schmucks, like I'm a schmuck when I go buy a car and I try and get a 50% discount. That's essentially what they do, right? Is they're like, oh, this thing has all these problems. Your finances aren't 100% together. We'll give you 50 cents on the dollar, maybe 25, right?
Yeah.
And these founders, they don't want to go through that. Like they've spent their life building these businesses that are very important to them, their customers, their families and whatnot. They want to see them treated well in the future. They want a nice handoff. And so one option that they have, and that a couple of our members have been exploring, is reaching out to similar businesses and then saying, hey, maybe we can create some kind of nice handoff here where my dignity is preserved. You get this good business, and then you pay me out over time. Because I really don't want to deal with these marketplaces.
Yeah. Or PE firms. Right?
Or PE firms.
Or just people that are doing roll-ups, which is really, really common. So everybody gets like a drive-by phone call. And they're basically like, oh my gosh, here goes a year of my life and a bad offer at the end of it, or an onerous offer that doesn't value what I value. So back to small business owners, back to lifestyle businesses, like let's talk about what they do value. They value legacy, they value relationships, and they value their clients or their customers. Think about all the business owners that you have a relationship with and ask yourself if any of them might be looking for a dignified exit within the next 5 years.
Yep.
And ask yourself, might you position yourself to be a conversation partner for that exit? And what we're seeing is what's really interesting. Notice I didn't say money on the top list of things that they care about. So what we're seeing is seller financed deals. In other words, you take care of my clients. I trust you. You can pay me pennies on the dollar based on what you make on those customers for the next 3 years. It hits this number and we're good to go. There's a lot of people in this room of 25 founders that are familiar with traditional M&A and PE and are involved with these things. And we're blown away by the quality of the deals from a financial perspective. And so the idea is like they care about kindness, not being beat up over the fact that they didn't update their accounting software in the last 5 years or whatever. They care about their clients' relationships. They want them to be taken care of. They care about their legacy, and they ultimately care about who takes over the business. This is the theme we've talked about since 2015 when we sold our first business. We're starting to see a lot more returns come in from this strategy in terms of like what we call like a friendly acquisition.
Yeah.
So friendly, in fact, that the multiples are incredible. There's no cash down, and the seller is actually financing the deal.
Mm-hmm.
And by seller financing, I just want to clarify, because not all of us are in this world. The seller financing simply means that you're paying for the business out of the cash flow of the business. So that's how the seller is financing the deal. Cool. Takeaway number 2, what the hell is leadership? Something that I've been thinking a lot about this year. because I saw somewhere written out, I think it was like one of those knowledge Twitter accounts that basically listed profitable skill sets, and they listed leadership as the most profitable skill set. And I was like, okay, you got my attention. That's interesting. And it's something that we've been just thinking a lot about as a community. We struggle with it. Sometimes we want to be leaders. Sometimes we don't want to be leaders. And we started because we're good at something, and now all of a sudden we're leaders. And like, well, what does it mean? Does it mean like you're like a sports coach all of a sudden? Does it mean you're an inspirational character? A lot of us aren't. But does it mean that you're a military type person? You know, does it mean you read success books? Well, one of our members, and I'll shout him out because he's been on the pod, Anthony Fasano, he's so smart, excellent leader, by the way, went to a conference where there was a bunch of military leaders talking about leadership, and he shared some of the ideas with us, and it really stuck with me. So he brought up this framework called the Leader's Intent Framework. And again, this is a framework that works for people who are willing to die for a cause. So now think about it, how this could port into a business where you're actually like paying people to do things. So it should work extra good. Here's the idea. How can you give people enough clarity to act independently when conditions change? So many of us are frustrated by SOP breakdowns in our companies, and we get these initiatives going and it all breaks down. So the idea is this: you write up a single document for every key project. It could be a podcast. It could be an event. It could be your next product launch. And it only has 4 key areas. And it's this: the purpose. So what is the purpose of the project? What is the purpose of this podcast right now? What is the end state? So you actually paint a picture of what the end state looks like, and then you write a section about the key tasks. These are the key things that are going to need to be accomplished for us to enter into the end state together. The 4th part is a debrief, where after the project, you sit down with the team in a non-judgmental manner, and you ask yourselves, like, how close to the original intent of this project were we? It's 4 steps. It's simple. What does that smell? It smells like leadership. I like it. The image that he said is it's like presenting the puzzle box, the top of the puzzle box to your team. Like, this is what the puzzle looks like, this beautiful forest view when we're finished with all this craziness. It really resonated with me a few times because I noticed that, like, even at this event, like, we have some notes like, oh, we got to change this or we got to do this a little bit differently. I was wondering if my end state image was exactly the same as every person who organized the event end state image, but all the key tasks were done, but the end state wasn't always like completely in alignment. And so this, I felt like that's a little bit of lack of leadership, where I wasn't necessarily sharing like my end state vision in a clear way. I was simply talking about the project in terms of the tasks required to be completed.
I think what you're saying, Dan, is like a big part of the leadership game is starting with the vision.
Yeah.
And like you said, just to use these events as an example, you know, ops guy has a vision, events person has a vision, you have a vision, I have a vision. You know, my vision is tears. I'd like to see lots of tears. Yours is high fives or whatever, right?
Yep. Yeah, and same vision is if we all cry communally at some
exactly.
point, this event will be a success. I'm pretty sure we got there in the karaoke room during the George Michael song. I'm pretty sure we got there.
Next event's going to be all about levitation because we think that might be possible at this point. But like you said, we all have a different vision for it. And it's like, yeah, you can look at the NPS score at the end of it. That's, I think, a good way to tie in the leadership and the vision to it. But ultimately, how do we execute on the vision, I think, is the leadership component.
So again, to clarify this simple thing, you can look up, we'll have in the show notes, it's called Leader's Intent or Commander's Intent. It's used extensively in the military. What is our purpose? What is our end state? What are the key tasks? And then how are we going to debrief? A very simple framework to bringing some leadership to the table for anybody. I mean, again, leadership, most profitable skill? Question mark? That means everybody should be doing some more leadership. That's what I'm thinking. All right, next one, aggressive investment in AI workflows.
No surprise here.
No surprise here. We're seeing founder level, deep digging into the operational processes of the business, whether it's development. A really interesting workflow we saw was actually involved in negotiation. So We're talking about, I don't know if I want to say the exact asset, but it's something on the web that you can find the price of. It's a little bit complicated to find the price, but we're finding it. We're getting a back and forth going. And what we're doing is we're looking at down to the cent, the costs of the key operations in our businesses. And it's really interesting to see from the CEO level, people digging in and pushing these AI workflows absolutely as far as they can go.
Yeah, and that was like probably a 20-step process that involved like 4 people, I think. And it's critical to this business, the way that they buy things and resell them. But it was a 20-part process. They eliminated 4 people and they showed us like the whole workflow. Now, somebody else showed us a workflow for eliminating 4 of their devs in their team too. And I think what was interesting about both of them, and maybe this is like pretty obvious, but again, the vision doesn't get cut out with AI. The architecture doesn't get cut out with AI. What gets cut out is like all the repeatable tasks.
Cool. Next one. In the same breath, we're talking about automating the types of tasks that we might be sending over to places in Philippines or India or whatever. We're also talking about hiring the right types of new team members. And so that was a major takeaway as well. Who the heck should I hire? And one of the things that Anthony also brought up, and we were discussing with a lot of people, is Dan Martell's framework, Buy Back Your Time. So I actually listened to the book on the airplane on the way back. I think his perspective is really interesting because he lays out some solid frameworks on how to hire. For example, Ian, he has a pretty clear progression. He says you should hire admin before you're ready, in fact. He believes that most founders wait till $1 million in revenue to get EAs. He thinks you should do it earlier in the game, for example. Then you move on to delivery, marketing, sales, and ultimately leadership. He also has this framework called the DRIP framework. You should automate, or you should hire for things that you dread, that are repetitive, that you're inconsistent in your delivery, or that you're procrastinating on. He also says in the book that your calendar reveals your true priorities. So his process starts with intense time audits, valuing those tasks per dollar. We're doing the same thing with ourselves, that we're doing with our team, that we're doing with AI. We're down to the dollar. Like, how much is this segment on my calendar worth to me and in this business? Both from an energetic perspective, I like that Dan Martell covers the energy part, and also from a dollars and cents perspective. So what I'm seeing is what entrepreneurs have always been doing, which is crossing the T's and dotting the I's in terms of every dollar has a job, and let's make sure it's getting done. And I think the kind of message in Buy Back Your Time is for a lot of founders, he calls it, they have the GSD, get shit done mindset, which is like, we're the last ones to get the treatment, right? So we're deep in the AI workflows. We're deep in the executive assistants. We got 20 people on the other side of the world doing stuff. And then meanwhile, our calendars are a total show of low value work. We're stressed out. We're sitting in front of the computer for way too long. So this was a big theme at the event too. How do you buy back your time effectively? And the way you do it is by making great hires. We got a point here just called Scott Heiferman. Like, Scott Heiferman is a force of nature, built meetup.com, sold it for $1 gazillion, and is a total force of nature. And he came by and was incredibly transparent with us. I'm wondering if you could share some of your top takeaways from him.
So extremely generous of Scott to come by. You know, one of the cool things about these Q&As, I guess, Dan, is like how much research we get to do into somebody. So one of the interviews, shout out to Bryce of Indie VC that I watched, which kind of kicked this whole thing off for me. He had Scott on his show. And I watched that a couple of weeks ago. And then because of that, I reached out to Scott and then started doing research after that. So Scott was basically, yes, he founded, I think he had 5 co-founders, meetup.com. Before that, though, he founded at least 2 other very successful startups. One was iTraffic, and then the other one was Photolog. And Photolog, I think it was like larger than Google at a time in certain countries. Like, it was that big of a site. So eventually, yeah, he moved to New York City, and then he started meetup.com after 9/11. He was very early to New York City. Like, he was in the building with the other guys building interesting stuff. Like early days, like 5th tech entrepreneur to like come to New York City. So again, it really matters where you are and the types of people that you're hanging out with. I think Scott is like living proof of that. Would Scott have done great things anywhere? Of course. Yeah, of course. But the location really mattered, and who he was hanging out with really mattered. And so, yeah, we got a chance to talk to Scott about meetup.com early days, and then also like some of his hiring practices. I think one of the most interesting things for me, though, to come out of that conversation was what Scott's working on and kind of some of the struggles I think that he's honestly having in terms of like his next thing. If you're Scott or a guy like Scott, you have founded some of the biggest internet companies in the world. And now you basically are going to do it again, or you're going to do some version of it again, right? And I've met people in this situation before, but I don't think it's like an envious situation. Like if that was me, I would feel so much pressure to perform. I actually asked people like, hey, would you rather stick with your current business or start something new? And like 90% of the hands in the room were like, stick with my current business. And there's a lot of problems with our current businesses, right? I think at the end of the day, like when you have something going and you have some momentum, it's really hard to like get off that and start something new because everybody knows you're kind of starting from ground zero.
Here's the progression that Scott laid out. You can do work. So there's work. And typically you get paid to do work because it's not that fun to do. But if you're lucky, you can up level to a career. And a career is something where, you know, you might be in it for quite some time, build career capital, build a reputation. Now all of a sudden your compensation is commensurate with the results that you're creating. You're getting new opportunities to your career. And I think that's the vast majority of us. That's where we're at. We have a career. It's awesome. But then, there's something beyond a career. There's a calling. And when you hear the call, you have to decide, is it, you know, the siren calling you to the rocks, or is it the lighthouse bringing you into the harbor of your calling, right? And that's an interesting thing to wrestle with. Like, I have this call. I want to start the next thing. I'm a starter. Well, what's your calling? And how do you decide how much downside there is for not going after your calling? So, you know, one of these things that happen in these rooms where people get together and there's not a camera on, and it's tough being an entrepreneur, and you start trying to work this stuff out for yourself. And I thought it was cool how Scott just broke bread with us in that way and shared with us that meetup.com was a hell of a calling. I mean, I love that website. Changed my life. We had our first business mastermind thanks to meetup.com. You know, we've ridden our bikes all around the world thanks to meetup.com. A hell of a calling. And so, cool story. Okay, so the right room matters. Consider the progression of work, career, and calling. But yeah, location is still the most high fidelity way to kind of interact.
Final thing I'll say just about Scott's visit, it's never surprising to me how people with his level of success are so curious either. Curiosity is a key trait in someone that is as successful as he is. That's a hard one, right, Dan? Because like you can't really teach for curiosity. Like you just actually have to be curious. Scott is genuinely curious about like different people, life, businesses. Like he's always exploring it.
There's this like 9-figure mix that's something like humble curiosity when it comes to learning and like violent action when it comes to working. It's like an interesting mix that you see in people like Scott, like the intensity with which he described his work, the intensity with which he shipped product and grew that business and ran it and fulfilled the mission. But then the humility with which he learns about things is an interesting mix. All right, next insight. I just want to talk about like the process for annual planning vis-a-vis setting a top line via your goals and then working backwards into your top line via your plans. We did a whole episode about it a few weeks ago, just with a simple GPS system, right? Like goals and planning. I always feel validated when I talk to some of these much larger companies that have boards, that have CEOs, that have investors, and the rigor with which they need to do this. And I was speaking with one member, he's like, well, we do it 3 years out. You know, that's how we roll around here. And the insight he shared with me was that like, look, we put the top line to where we think it's possible, and it's partially important to do it for 3 years. It's not just for investors, because a lot of times your things you're doing right now, they're not going to hit in 12 months. Like, you want to see the impact of what that looks like a year and a half from now. Hey, everybody knows that the 3-year numbers come with the eraser end of the pencil, but the idea is we want to get a sense to anticipate what these subsequent years are going to look like when we start to hit our goals. And then we need to go back to the stakeholders of like each functional area of the business and back our way into those goals with projects to make sure it all makes sense. And so I just wanted to like revisit this concept of like, let's set our top line. For a lot of bootstrappers, we do it 12 months out. 3 years out, I think, is a great way to do it. I think that's the standard. And I think it's a standard for a reason, because it helps you to anticipate the type of team you need, the type of metrics you'll need to set, the types of projects and products you'll need to roll out. Like, an excellent way to do this is to set your 3-year goals and just ask yourself, how many units are you going to need to move, to do this? And then back yourself into that. Like, what kind of team delivers those kinds of units? What kind of metrics are required, in terms of traffic, conversions, average order value, whatever it is, in order to hit the goals that you have for yourself. Sometimes I think for a lot of us, we're bootstrappers because we avoid doing this. We're just doing stuff, but it's a really useful exercise. The best companies do it, the biggest companies do it, and it applies to bootstrappers as well.
At these events, Dan, we went to the Mets Stadium. We had a bunch of good dinners and drinks and all that good stuff. But the majority of our time is spent in a mastermind together. And one of the prompts for the mastermind on the last day was your 2026 plan. So basically, everybody wrote it out, what they needed to achieve or what they wanted to achieve in 2026, and then they bounced it off their peers. The value of that, I think, again, in these groups is like getting feedback on it. A lot of times you come up with these plans and you're just coming up with plans in a vacuum. You're just like, well, I'd like to grow 20% next year. And then you bring it to the team and they're like, yeah, that sounds great. And then you fall short and you're like, well, what happened? Well, I didn't actually have a plan for the 20%. I just wanted to like hit 20%. So I think sometimes these plans, they need to be plans, not just goals.
That's right. If the person who runs your marketing or your operations agrees like, hey, yeah, they're nodding their head like we're going to get to 25% growth next year, can we credibly build a plan to improve the deliverability of our product by X percentage? Because that will lead to that. The numbers don't number unless it does that. And so that's the whole idea here. All right, next one. Artist versus entrepreneur. It's so interesting. The crossover, so much love of art in the room full of business people. I think there's an incredible amount of crossover. We talked about it a lot. A lot of us want to build. We want to be creative. And it was a joy to welcome Keith Murray, lead singer of We Are Scientists, into the room. Well done on bringing him in. Super cool guy, but also a bit nostalgic for us, just in the sense that when we started our first business, we were drinking energy drinks. We were working nights and weekends. We were working all the time. It was so amazing. It was such a heroic struggle, boss man. The way we got through it is by listening to We Are Scientists, because they rock so hard.
It's true.
And one of the things I really liked about We Are Scientists is that the way that they interacted with their fans was always like, they were like the 37 Signals of rock bands. Like, they weren't trying to be cool. They were funny and they were interactive and they were accessible. And it turns out that Keith was just totally cool. And we had such a good time speaking with him. When he shared his creative process with us, with the group, it reminded me a lot of entrepreneurship, which is this idea of like, at a certain point in my career, I just realized I needed to keep writing songs, that was what I was in it for.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what's going to lead to results. And similar thing in entrepreneurship and artistry is that, guess how many hits you need to have a successful career? One. Ask Mr. Rick Roll. You need one hit. You can write a bunch of bad songs. You need one hit. And that's exactly what we're talking about with entrepreneurship. You buy 99 domains, you put up 99 crappy business ideas, and you need exactly one to hit to give yourself a lifelong career in entrepreneurship. And then you got to do what we call business systems, which are reliable, validated business ideas like goal planning and goal setting and backing yourself into it with a plan and putting those plans on scorecards that people can execute and checking in on those plans with a regular cadence. And guess what? Keith does the same thing because he knows he's got a record in 6 months he needs to put out. He needs to write 100 songs for the record. He only needs a couple good songs to make the record good. And so let's get writing those 100 songs. And so I thought that was really interesting. Also saw a lot of passion for artistry in the karaoke booth after the evening parties. There's a lot of camaraderie and musical people in the Dynamite Circle.
We could talk forever on this one, Dan. I thought it was super cool how Keith came down. We had a couple drinks before the Q&A, and so we really got to like dig into the scene in music in the early 2000s, which we spared everyone in the room of that for the most part. But for our pleasure and enjoyment, that was great to get some like insights. Some of the insights just from that conversation, and then I'll get into my biggest insight from him and the band, was, you know, most of the bands that we listened to back in the day, and this will be the case going forward too, basically are not around anymore. And according to Keith, they are still around. His band, We Are Scientists, and they've been around for 28 years. According to Keith, the reason they're not around and the reason We Are Scientists is still around, and I believe this, I think our relationship is a testament to this, is because the founders actually like each other. They're in it for the same reason. Keith and his bandmate Chris are in it together. Like they're really in a marriage model, right? Like they like touring together. They like writing songs together. They like hanging out together. It's clear they're friends. That's the reason why they're in the band. And so a lot of these bands, according to him, crash out because the founders, you know, basically fall out of love, or they were never in love, or they're just making music and that's not enough, basically, according to him. And so again, that relates to business, right? It's like to be in a long-standing relationship with your founder or co-founder.
Even your audience, right? Like your customers. You have to serve customers that you like working with. You don't necessarily have to, but if you want to be doing it for 15 years, decent plan.
Yeah. So that's that. And there was a lot of breakthroughs with Keith, but this was the funniest, biggest breakthrough for me. Neither of them planned on being professional musicians. Okay. Like I think Keith was like
the value of the amateur.
Yes. He was in film, doing something in film. I don't know what his co-founder was doing. When they started the band, okay, big reveal, Chris didn't know how to play an instrument.
That reminds me of entrepreneurship.
Yes. And that was exactly my thought, which was, you know, when you're talking to somebody and they've got a job or whatever, and they go to you and they say, well, Dan, I can't do that because like, I don't know how to design products, or like, I don't know how to podcast, or
I need to get a new degree.
I don't know how to do this or that. When you think of a band, at least for me, because I don't play music, I just consume it. I think that most people in a band, they must have just been born with a guitar under their arm. Like they just from birth strumming the guitar. Like no one learns how to play the guitar. They just know how to play the guitar. No, turns out you have to learn these things too. And the dude literally didn't know how to play an instrument. And he's in this famous rock and roll band now. That just blew my mind because these weren't young guys either when this happened. They were in their 20s.
But also like as you gain experience, the more you know, professionalism can drag you down from creativity. So you gotta balance these things as you build up your skills. Can you still do something that feels a little bit dumb? Right? Because sometimes dumb is where all the action is. There's a reason I play this guitar a lot. If I played that guitar for 8 hours a day, I would for sure be a jazz guitarist. At a certain point, you get so professional that you feel you need to do the right sorts of things, versus like, well, what if we just made like this killer, like dance rock band, like dance rock. That's weird. You just need one hit. By the way, for aficionados of the show, the old intro music to this show was inspired by We Are Scientists. Like I wrote a We Are Scientists intro music to this show.
The final thing to wrap up the We Are Scientists segment here is really cool Rip Pivot Jam moment. When we were talking music over some drinks before the Q&A, we're talking about all these bands that we used to listen to. So Rip Pivot Jam, like a framework for starting a new business or a new idea, right? So you rip a decent idea, you make some changes to it, which is the pivot, and then you jam, you go forward.
Yeah. You learn how to play your instrument.
Yeah. and a cool Rip Pivot Jam moment for We Are Scientists, and you called Keith out on this, not called him out, but you recognized it. You said, I bet you guys were listening to The Rapture at the time.
Right.
Who sounds, has a similar sound. And he's like, yes, I was listening to The Rapture And I had this moment where I thought, like, basically we can write hooks better than the Rapture does. So I'm going to like take some of the underlying elements of like how the Rapture operates, and then I'm going to add in this part that I feel like I can do better, and then boom, we are scientists now.
Or better yet, like the Rapture, as far as I understand it, they weren't willing to write hooks. Like they were so cool. Like they could never write a hook. And so Keith Murray comes along with his best bud who can't play the bass, and he's like, guess what I could do? Be not cool. And I can write a hook for this amazing sound. When I joined a band back in the day, this was such a hot sound. I was handed the Rapture. It was like under a piece of black velvet. Listen to this incredibly cool sound. We too will start a band with this cool sound. We Are Scientists saw the same cultural movement. They saw the same timing. They were around the right people. All these principles are coming together.
Yep.
They were excited and amateur enough to say, well, we could do it too. But why aren't these guys writing hooks, man? That's what makes the world go around. That's what spins the CD, man. We got to write some hooks. No one's listening to the Rapture. And sure enough, they started We Are Scientists. They had their hit record. They're going to tour the world next year on their 20th anniversary of that record. That was that one moment of, why isn't anybody taking this incredible sound and making it accessible to the broader rock audience? Good on you, Keith Murray. Great decision. Great band. All right, a couple honorable mention insights, Ian, here. I just want to shout out to all of our members who made difficult, bold decisions, and in a few cases paid off handsomely and unexpected this year. So this is a lesson to anybody listening along at home that feels like next year might not be as good as this year. Like things are getting worse. That was actually the situation for a few of our members at last year's conference. I'm thinking of three people in particular. One who came to me and said, last year at this conference, we projected that our business would be reduced by 30% this year, when in fact we tacked on $1 million of expanded revenue and maintained our current business. There's a couple other stories of innovation just like that, where people kind of planned for the worst, but also went after it and had incredible returns. So sticking again with their core business, which they thought was going to go down, but decided to innovate out of the challenge. In one case, shutting down a product and starting another one, which brought in the new revenue, not expected, but again, focusing on that same mission, the same kind of calling of the business, but addressing the challenge in a bold way versus just kind of letting the degradation come in, or letting AI come in, or letting market changes affect your business. A couple members made really hard choices. Hey, I built a team around this whole product. Guess what? The product's failing. I should address the team about this. Like, why have a team work for another year on a failing product? We're going to start this new thing and we're going to reapply people who fit the new thing, or we're going to make changes. So I think, look, like if you've got a business unit or a product that's going to have a bad 2026, who does it help to not let your team know about that? You know, if you're anticipating, go to your team and be like, look, the thing we've been working on isn't working out so well. I think you should know about it too. Right? Maybe you need to do some career planning. Maybe we need to change your job, whatever, like get on it. Like, I don't think this idea of like being a martyr and like holding on as tight as possible and hoping thing works out. I saw the counter example this year where it's like, you know what? We took the bull by the horns. We jumped onto the new product. Yep. We out innovated our competition and we saw great results. And by the way, the bad thing that we thought was going to happen didn't happen, but we were responsive to it.
Yeah, these guys include us in this as well. It's like a healthy dose of paranoia always does the business right, you know? So everybody thinks they're 6 months away from the end of the earth or the end of their business, which I think is, can be a healthy way to operate some of these businesses. But in the case of these people that you're mentioning, Dan, I thought also it was inspiring. You know, one of them in particular turned the business completely around. Like they were going to be at zero at the end of last year, and then they showed up here having added $500,000 in revenue to the business.
Very cool. Couple other quick hitters. Talking about rebranding, asking for help. You know, we talk about the concept of therapy, mastermind, coaching. Like asking for help might not be the best branding for this stuff. I'm thinking about repitching it, Ian, as, you know, paying really smart people to dig into the details of the blockers or constraints that you're currently facing. it's often framed up as like, oh, I finally decided that I needed some help, and then I asked for help, and my life freaking changed for the better. And I'm just like, maybe this is poor framing, poor marketing for this concept of like, what we do at these masterminds, where you prepare, you send it to your controller, CFO, you get the detailed numbers. There's 6 people who are paid very well. In fact, they couldn't be paid to be there, are digging in to your particular challenge with the details. Now, is that valuable? Yeah. Is that going to make your life better? Yeah. Is that asking for help? Whatever. Frame it the way you want it. The point is to do it more often. And if you can get smart people, whether paying, going to events, therapy is like pennies on the dollar relative to business coaching, which you can get a lot of business value out of that too. Yep. So anyway, don't ask for help. Just pay super smart people to dig into the details. Final thing is a general private equity interest in what we're building. This is a continuing trend. We're seeing a lot more private equity partnerships and people building for eventual exits that are life-changing.
Obligatory pitch at the end of this, Dan. Are you going to join us next year? 2026. Are you going to hang out with a bunch of very cool entrepreneurs that call themselves rock stars, and then we actually invite in a rock star, and then they're like, well, I'm not a rock star anymore.
They've proven
this guy's
that
a rock
they're
star.
all actually rock stars. This is the first year I went to karaoke, and I was blown away at the level of music passion, and the singing quality was really fun. New York is just a fun town around Christmas time.
It is.
The final night after the closing party, snow started coming down. There's all these Christmas bars everywhere, all different kinds of people from around the world in the streets. The Empire State Building. You just can't beat it, man. All right, good event. Good event on you, boss man.
High five.
Coming
into 2026. I think we only got 1 or 2 more of these left in 2025. So
on to the next one. You're only as good as your last event. So
that's right.
On to the next one. All right, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. You can click into the show notes on our website or on your telephone to see links to everything mentioned in this episode, as well as a lot of helpful resources and links to everything that we do. That is it for this week. We'll be back next Thursday morning, as is always, reliably, like a United Airlines flight.
Phew. Thank goodness for that price increase we paid.
We're going to land it reliably like a United Airlines flight. Thanks for joining me, boss man.
See you then.